Our topic is the ethics of Buddhism. Let us begin with the life of the Buddha. The Buddha was born around 563 BC in Kapilavastu, which is the present Nepal. His family name was Gautama, and his given name was Siddhartha. His father was the prince of the Sakya clan. And before the Buddha was born, his mother dreamt of the future Buddha entering into her womb as a white elephant with flowers blooming. Then a sage foretold that the boy would be a wanderer or a great warrior, great king. He would be a wanderer if he would encounter 4 signs. So, Buddha's childhood was in seclusion, in luxury, protected by the father from learning of the sufferings, the sorrows, frustrations of the outside world. However, one day, Siddhartha was able to get out from the palace, and he chanced upon 4 people: a beggar, an old man, a leper, and a corpse. And this disturbed him. So he decided to look for the meaning of life. He became a wandering ascetic, consulting hermits and sages for 6 to 7 years. He tried the ascetic denial of body demands, and he almost starved to death. So he was convinced that this is not the right path. And then he sat under a tree, and there under the tree, he was illuminated. And this tree became the Bodhi tree. So after his enlightenment, he journeyed to the sacred city of Benares. And before Benares at Sarnath, he gave his first sermon and gathered disciples. So this in brief is the life of the Buddha. Now, what are the basic teachings of the Buddha? Before that, Buddha was a kind of personality that was very compassionate, and then he was also a very intelligent and very sharp. Okay, and this I'll give you an example of his wit. Okay, this is an example of an independent inquiry of the Buddha. Believe in nothing because a wise man said it. Believe in nothing because it is generally accepted. Believe in nothing because it is written. Believe in nothing because it is said to be divine. Believe in nothing because somebody else believed it. Believe only what you yourself judge to be true. Okay. Now, let's go to the sources of Buddhism, of Buddha's teaching. There are 3 sources. This is called the PALI-CANON, or the 3 PITAKAS. Pitaka means basket in Sanskrit. Okay? You have the discipline basket, you have the discourse basket, and then you have the exposition basket. It is in the exposition basket that there was a division in Buddhism, the Mahayana and the Hinayana. The Hinayana means the small vehicle, also called the Theravada Buddhism. And then you have the Mahayana, which is the larger vehicle. In the Mahayana Buddhism, it is said that Buddha was about to step into the shore of Nirvana, but then he heard the cries of the people. So he made a vow that he will never go to Nirvana until everybody is saved. Okay. So now let's go to the basic teachings of the Buddha. You have the 4 noble truths. The first noble truth is that life is dukkha. Dukkha means suffering. No? Life is basically dukkha. Life is suffering. Here we have the philosophy of suffering in Buddhism. No? What is this suffering? What is this dukkha? It's like an axle that is off-center in a wheel. Okay? There is pain, there is misery that seeps at the very depths of human existence. Now, the Buddha is not denying that there is joy also in life, but this joy is not permanent. No? There is the dislocation in life, starting from birth, the trauma of birth, the pathology of sickness. All of us undergo sickness. No? There is the morbidity of decrepitude. There is the phobia of death. Okay? There is the suffering of being tied down to one that one abhors. Okay? And there is, of course, the suffering of being separated from your loved ones. So life is dukkha. Okay? But the second noble truth is that the cause of this misery, the cause of this dislocation is tanha. Tanha literally means desire. Tanha is desire for one's own private fulfillment at the expense of other forms of life. So you have a cycle here of becoming that is caused by craving, okay, and grasping and clinging. Okay. And the craving leads only to more suffering here and now, and also in the hereafter in the form of a rebirth. Okay. So that's the second noble truth. The cause of one's suffering is tanha. Okay. The third noble truth is the cure lies in the overcoming of tanha, in the overcoming of craving and attachment. That is the third noble truth. There is a cure. Okay? And the fourth noble truth is that the way to eliminate craving and clinging is the eightfold path. Okay? So what is the eightfold path? Number one is right view. Right view. That means the right attitude, the right faith, the right knowledge. The second path is the right thought or the right aspiration. Okay? Then the third is right speech. Okay? The fourth is right action. The fifth is right livelihood, right living. The sixth is right effort. The seventh is right mindfulness, which is becoming very popular nowadays. Okay? And number 8, the last one, is right concentration. So if you will notice that the first three belongs to the rational aspect of the human being. No? Right thought, right view, right speech. And then the second, third, right living, right action, right effort, belongs to the volitional aspect of the human being. And the last, right mindfulness and right concentration, belongs to the emotional aspect of the human being. Okay? Now, aside from these Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, there is also the doctrine of the dependent origination. What is that doctrine? This doctrine says that everything falls under causation, which is the central teaching of the Buddha, aside from the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. In other words, nothing in this world does not come within the realm of causation, of causal laws. Causality, in other words, explains the arising and the passing away of things. Okay? Now, related to this doctrine of dependent origination is the doctrine of momentariness. Okay? Meaning that everything is momentary. A thing arises depending upon the cause, and so if you remove the cause, the thing ceases to be, and therefore momentary. All things are subject to destruction. Everything in this world is relative, impermanent, momentary. All things are passing. Related also to the doctrine of momentariness is the doctrine of karma. Okay? What is karma? Karma is the behavior, the deed of the person that is determined by three factors. Of course, you have the external stimuli, then you have the motives, conscious motives, and then you have the unconscious motives. What are some of the conscious motives that we have? They would be greed, attachment, hate, aversion, confusion. Okay? And what would be unconscious motives? Fear of death, okay? Desire to avoid death, desire to perpetuate life. Okay? And these unconscious motives result from our misunderstanding, wrong understanding of the nature of human existence. Okay? That everything is permanent, impermanent, that everything is under causation. Okay? Now, karma is, normally in Filipino, we say karma is something bad, na karma ka, no? But in Buddhism, you have good karma and you have bad karma. No? It is conditioned by causes, and the causes also would have an effect, and the effect would also be the cause. No? So there is a correlation between action and consequences. No? However, we should not think of karma as being deterministic. No? It depends on the nature of the karma and the circumstances in which the action is done, is committed. And there would be appropriate consequences. Okay? And then another doctrine of the Buddha is the doctrine of rebirth or transmigration. And this is corollary, of course, to the doctrine of the Dharma. So one undergoes a cycle of birth and rebirth. And that is because one is ignorant of the fact that things are impermanent. And so we will cling to the things in this world, leading to suffering. Okay? And suffering is death. Finally, with the doctrine of rebirth, death is therefore not a separation of body and soul, okay? But rather the end of a certain life, a certain aspect of life, and the beginning of another. Okay? The death cycle is based on ignorance. Okay? And so what is the ultimate end, therefore, of Buddhism? It is none other than to achieve nirvana. Okay? Nirvana is the goal of the Eightfold Path and the Godhead of Buddhism. Nirvana is the cessation of suffering. It means extinguishing. No? However, nirvana is incomprehensible. It's unutterable. It is boundless life itself. Now, of course, it's misinterpreted as the annihilation of one's soul or one's soul's eternal existence. Okay? But that is not the positive concept of nirvana. Now, we can see, therefore, that the path of Buddhism to perfection is gradual. No? Human beings, like houses, are like lotuses in a pan. Okay? And the highest stage would be to grow in a muddy water, but rise above this water and smeared by the mud of the water. Okay? Now, there are two aspects of this moral behavior, of this path to perfection. One is negative, that is avoiding evil, and the other is positive, which is cultivating the good. So, if one restrains from hurting or killing, then that's negative. Then there is a positive aspect there of showing respect, compassion for all human beings. Now, aside from this doctrine of the Buddha, the fourfold, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, there are 5 moral virtues advocated by the Buddha. What are these 5 virtues? Number 1 is restraint from taking life from hurting others. Okay? Number 2 is restraint from taking what is not given to you. Okay? Number 3 is restraint from indulgence in sense pleasures. Okay? Number 4 is restraint from falsehood. Number 5 is restraint from indolence as a consequence of the use of intoxicants. aside from these 5 moral virtues, you have the Pangkasila, or Dasasila rather, the 10 moral virtues. The 10 moral virtues consist of the first 4 and an additional 6. Okay? The 5th is restraint from slander. The 6th is restraint from rough speech or harsh speech. The 7th is restraint from frivolous chatter. The 8th rather, is restraint from covetousness. The 9th is restraint from malevolence. And the last is restraint from false or heretical views. Now, these moral virtues are intended to bring not only the moral development of an individual, but also to promote harmony, concord, and social upliftment. So the Noble Eightfold Path is a digest of these moral virtues together with the processes of concentration and development of insight. Now, this attitude of renunciation is behind every moral virtue. Okay? The renunciation is the most effective way of eliminating suffering. Now, let's go to the ethical judgment, therefore. So what would be the Buddhist basis for judging something to be right or wrong? Okay? For the Buddhist, right action would lead to detachment, whereas bad action would lead to attachment. So the good, it is good because it leads to happiness and freedom. And attachment is bad because it leads to suffering. Okay? Now, the good, therefore, is identified with what is wholesome, what is healthy, and the bad is identified with what is unwholesome and unhealthy. So, whatever action, bodily, mental, verbal, leads to suffering for oneself, for others, or for both, that action is bad. Okay? And whatever action, bodily, mental, verbal, that does not lead to suffering for oneself or for others, that action is good. Okay? So the definition of good and bad is described as the mirror of the Dhamma. Okay? What is Dhamma? Dhamma is truth. It is identified with the truth about the world, namely causality. So the good is equated with the truth, and the bad is equated with the untruth. The Buddha was conscious of the relativity of ethical judgments, but refuses to identify or to differentiate reality or truth and value. So both truth and ethical values participate in nature. Now, for the Buddha, the world is not just things. It's not just objects in space and time. No? The world consists also of feelings, dispositions, like likes and dislikes. No? And human dispositions constitute a very important causal factor in the world. No? It makes every judgment or truth or untruth, or good or bad, relative rather than absolute. It follows, therefore, that the pacification of all such dispositions enables one to understand truth or falsehood, good or bad, as they are. So, causation being the truth about the world, the causal processes determined by dispositions, condition, leads to bondage and suffering. Okay? While the causal processes, the causal process undetermined by dispositions and condition, therefore, leads to freedom and happiness. So, attachment or detachment, the presence or absence of dispositions provide the basis of moral judgments. Now, what is the Buddhist golden rule then? The Buddhist golden rule reads that one who loves himself should not harm another. one who loves himself should not harm another. So there is the equality of self and the other. That is the basis, the foundation of the golden rule. Okay? And that foundation is none other than the commonality of suffering and happiness. Remember the first noble truth, life is dukkha. Okay? So all equally experience suffering and happiness. And so I should look after them, after others, as I do myself. So in conclusion, what do we find in the ethics of Buddhism? Namely, the love that the Buddha preached is an all-embracing love, an unconditioned, self-giving compassion flowing freely from towards all living creatures.